I'm Peter, and this is the Tarot Table with Bonnie and Peter, where we lay the cards on the table to talk about life, tarot, and everything in between. So shuffle your deck, pull up a chair, and join us at the Tarot Table. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter.
And I'm Bonnie.
I'd like to welcome you to the Tarot Table with Bonnie and Peter. Well, today we're going to look at a variety of tarot myths. So, things that people attribute to the tarot that, well, might be true, might have grains of truth, or might be, might be mired in some pretty false information. So, some of the examples that we might look at today are things like you have to be gifted your first tarot deck, or if you're working with the tarot, you have to read reversals, which are upside down cards, or that if you work with the tarot, you can invite nefarious energy or evil spirits. So, Bonnie and I are going to discuss these myths and we're going to give you our take on them. We'd also like to invite you to contribute in whatever way you can via the comments below in whatever platform you're joining us on today. So the first myth, I'm going to kind of explore the first myth, I'm going to turn things over to Bonnie. Bonnie, what do you
Thank you,
think?
Peter.
Yeah, you're
I'm really excited about this conversation because a lot of these things can really impact someone's desire, maybe, to
Mhm.
dive into the tarot. So
Yeah.
we're hoping that this can dispel some of those myths. So, our first question, or our first myth, I guess I should say, is that tarot is only for fortune telling and that you have to be psychic to use the tarot. So, I think historically, and Peter, you'll probably get into this a little bit later, but it may have been used more as a tool for predicting the future, people wanting to know what's going to be the outcome or what can I expect. And there's definitely that side of tarot that you can use it to make predictive, you can use it for predictive reasons. I personally don't use the tarot like that. You can tell us a little bit later too, Peter, how you use the tarot, but I use the tarot more of a tool for self-discovery and to see what the energy is at the current moment. I think that we all have the ability to create our own future. So if you believe that the tarot is going to predict your future in some way, that almost takes your free will out of it, because if the tarot says something's going to happen, a lot of people will just raise their hands and say, okay, well, that's what's going to happen, so there's nothing that I can do to change that. And I really don't believe that is it doesn't really empower you to make decisions or to
Right.
take action. So, although it can be used for those reasons, I believe that a lot of people now, with the emergence of a lot of mindfulness practices and a lot of the self-development and discovery that people are doing for themselves, it can really be used as a tool to help you to see patterns or see things from a different perspective. And this whole idea that you have to be psychic to read the tarot, I also don't believe that to be true. I believe it's a tool that's really approachable and accessible to everybody. And what you're seeing when you pull the cards, you may get some intuitive insights, and I think that's great. I think what the tarot does is it helps you to trust your intuition more. I believe that for myself, as I started reading the tarot and studying it more, as I looked at the cards and interpreted what I thought the meaning would be, there's oftentimes other things that come to me that might be a little bit outside of the card. So I think it's kind of the reverse, that if you start to use the tarot, you may notice that your intuition is starting to expand. So there's books that go with the tarot. So I don't think that you have to be psychic per se to learn to use the tarot or to use it for your own practice. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, look, and I think they can go hand in hand. I think, if someone's practice is based on fortune telling, then I imagine that the tarot is an effective tool for that. But as you mentioned, I'm the same. I don't use it for predictive work. I prefer not to have what I would say the cards remove the agency of whoever I'm working with. So whether it's client-based work or whether it's my own work, what I think the tarot does really well is it gives us options that we don't think about. And it does that because we're dealing with, a medium that's almost based on chaos and randomness. We take 78 cards, we shuffle them up, and then we allow the images that we see in the meanings through the cards to sort of guide us in a way that we may not have been guided before. Um, and I think the myth, and as you had mentioned, and I promise you I won't get into all kinds of history as a self-proclaimed history nerd. I could, but I won't.
Maybe that's another episode.
Could be, right?
We
But
can go deep.
the esoteric origin, like, so the tarot started as play, as a game of cards, and the first time it shifted into something else was through fortune telling. So it has a pretty close to a 250-year history of fortune telling. But I think, and maybe that's where the myth came from, but I'm with you. I think somebody who would state, oh, either you have to be psychic to use it or that it is only for fortune telling, I think is missing the opportunities for meditation work or self-reflection work or even play, or a tool for healing or psychological discovery. All of those things I think can be used, that the tarot can be used to support and enhance all of those kinds of practices as well. So that's, like I said, I didn't get into a lot of the history, but I think that's probably where that myth came from. So Bonnie, do you have another myth that you want to throw out there?
I do. So the next myth would be you must be gifted your first tarot deck or any tarot deck. Like you can't buy your own tarot deck. Somebody has to gift it to you. What do you think about that,
Well,
Peter?
look, I understand, and it probably came from some of the early books. I think of Eden Gray, or some of those early books on what you needed to do around the tarot. But look, for me, I would think that is completely false. Mentioned in the previous podcast episode that I bought my own deck. There's something about the experience actually of going to buy
Mhm.
a deck. I think of, tarot friendly shops, call them metaphysical, call them esoteric, pagan friendly. There's a certain, there's almost a smell and an energy, that you get when you walk in. Somebody's burning, sandalwood, or they're burning white sage incense, whatever they happen to be. And I think going to find your own deck makes it makes it a personal experience. So to me, I think that I won't say false. I'll say this because I'll say it 100 times. You do you. But I think if you're waiting for someone to gift you your first tarot deck, you're missing out on what could be a valuable experience. Now, having said that, I'd probably still have, 40, 45, maybe 50 decks. And I will from time to time, either through a deck swap or, through somebody I know where I think a deck might resonate with them, I may gift them a deck as well, just to say, you know what, here's a start on your journey to discovering the tarot. And, what do you think of this deck? My daughter comes to mind. I gifted her first deck. It was the Deviant Moon Tarot deck, which
Mm.
I quite liked initially and then stopped resonating with me. And I was like, I know my daughter. And I'm like, oh, this deck will speak to her. And sure enough, it did. And she kept it and she uses it. Um, and it was her first deck. So, she got the experience of being gifted her very first deck. And I'll also talk, in another episode when we talk about what our favorite decks are. One of my favorite decks is a deck that was gifted to me as well. So I don't know. Like I said, I would say you do you if you're listening, but you know, if you're waiting for somebody to gift you your first tarot deck, then you're why? Go and buy one, and start exploring with the tarot right away. What do you think, Bonnie?
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I was actually gifted my very first tarot deck when I was a teenager. I no longer have that deck, unfortunately. I don't know what happened to it. But as I began my tarot journey recently, I went into a store and as we talked about as well before, I sort of got some suggestions about what might be a good deck for me to start off with. And I love what you said about actually physically walking into the store. And what was told to me as well is, well, pick up the deck, like pick up the
Mhm.
box. How
Mhm.
does that box feel for you? Like, do you get a good feeling about that box, or is it like, this one doesn't feel right for me? So I think you'll get an energy from a deck when you pick it up if you're in a physical store. If you're not able to actually go to a physical store to buy a deck, then what you can do as well is go online and look at, videos where they do flip throughs of decks, and that can also sort of generate some excitement about decks that you're thinking about. So, yeah, if you're waiting for somebody to buy you a deck, there's so many different styles and decks out there. Who knows what they're going to pick? And it may not resonate with you. And if it doesn't resonate with you, that could even affect how you feel about this practice in general. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with buying your first deck. Even if you wanted it as a gift, you could tell somebody, hey, I really want this deck. My birthday's coming up. Buy it for me,
Right.
which is what
Because
I
we do that
usually
for
do.
other things, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Mother's Day is coming up,
Right.
and my kids are already, what do you want for Mother's Day? I'm like, probably some tarot decks. So I'll have to let you know. So I think there's beauty in selecting your deck. And that's not somewhere you have to start in terms of waiting for somebody to give it to you.
Yeah. And it also, I think, allows you to support either a small or local or independent business. And it lets you support tarot deck creators because, like anything else, there are fake decks out there. There are clone decks out
Yes.
there as well. So this way, by going and experiencing the deck tangibly, like to be able to physically manipulate it, you can probably be assured that the deck that you're getting as well is genuine, which will really help enhance your initial experience with the tarot deck. So,
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of times they'll have decks that you can actually flip through, or sometimes decks that they're using
mhm.
themselves. And they could say, oh, I love this deck. If you're contemplating that, I have it here with me. Have a look.
Yeah,
So a lot of times you can actually feel the deck and hold it in your hands. So,
yeah.
okay, Peter. So this one, our next few myths, this gets a little dark. Tarot is evil or dangerous, and reading tarot can invite negative energy or spirits. So this is a big one, and a lot of what made me afraid of the tarot for so many years, by listening to some people, their opinions, people that I respected about like, oh, um, by playing with something like that, it can predict bad things. And I think people have this idea that if a prediction is made and it doesn't look good, it's like the cards are making that happen.
Mhm,
And the cards themselves hold no magic. Like they're just cards with
mhm,
pictures on them. And what you get from that is your experience. So I don't believe the cards themselves are evil or dangerous because they don't really do anything.
mhm,
And this idea as well. I think your intention is the most important part of this practice. If your intention is coming from a place of love and compassion and just wanting some guidance or seeing things in a way that maybe has never been presented to you before, you're helping yourself to grow and to really discover things about you or things that maybe you've never considered. And if your intention is pure, which it is from my perspective. I use these cards in a loving way, and I have such a joy and a love for these images and these pieces of paper, really these pieces of cardboard that can really help me to expand and heal and all of these wonderful things. So I would not consider them in themselves to be evil or dangerous or invite anything negative, as long as you're coming from this place of love and compassion and intention of how you really want to use the cards. Not to say that people don't use them for those things, but that's not the purpose of the cards. What do you think about that, Peter?
Yeah, I would agree with almost everything. I'd agree with everything you said. I think, like anything, the tarot can be used for, non-positive or nefarious or evil things. Um, but I can use all kinds of objects whose that's intent wasn't negative for negative purposes.
Exactly.
So, I and I think it's challenging because, you've got, I think, both the cards themselves, which people could use, they could use them for evil or dangerous or whatever. And I guess we'd have to hold space for people, and I'll say it again, right? You do you. It's not how I'm choosing to use the cards. And then I also think of the environment around which people operate. And I think of scammers out there. I think of people creating fake accounts because they can use that as an avenue, for people when they're vulnerable, when they're asking questions, and reach out, yes, by all means. I always think about, the messages that come in my DM from time to time on Instagram, I've love and goodness for you. And, something came to me and I'm asking you to do a reading. And you have more and more practitioners, whether it's tarot or astrology or any other kind of divination, that are saying, I will never DM you for a reading. And I think that has come from people using the tarot environment for nefarious purposes. And I use that word only, instead of using kind of the word evil, that they're using it for negative purpose. And I think, well, okay, that's out there. Then what do we do then to protect ourselves to make sure that we're not caught up in that? And I know for me, my intention is never to use the tarot in that way. To kind of get into the idea of inviting negativity, I always think, I have a strong grounding practice when I start out my work, whether I'm working with myself, or whether I'm working with somebody else. I ground myself. I make sure that I'm shielding myself from any kind of, energy that might be coming from that work, and putting myself in a container that sets my intention as well. Well, this is the purpose of doing the work. I'm not providing the cards with any agency. I'm recognizing that any action that's coming from what I see in the cards is mine and mine alone. If I'm working for someone else, I would state that from the outset. As a matter of fact, I state it before anybody, I give people the opportunity to cancel a reading with me, because I'd come right out and say, I'm actually not going to predict anything for you, because the truth is, you have the power to do you. People have agency to act based on the information that they get. So I don't know. To me, that the myth doesn't even. I don't lend it a ton of credence, because it doesn't even sit inside the way I would use the cards in kind of both ways, whether or not it's they can be used for evil, or whether or not it invites the idea of negative energy or spirits. Anybody can bring negative energy. We've got energy vampires everywhere, people that just suck that positive energy from you, or are clouds of negative energy. And what do we do on an ongoing basis to try and protect ourselves from that? I think the tarot is the same. What do we do to protect ourselves? And maybe that's a topic for for a future episode. What kind of grounding practices or shielding practices do we use when we work with the tarot, whether it's for ourselves or someone else? But I do think that the onus is on us, as practitioners, to kind of protect ourselves if we're going to go into that kind of work. So, I don't know. That's
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. And I think even just having the intention that you're of what you're using it for, you're using it for your highest good, you're using it for clarity and open to the messaging that comes with it. I think as long as that energy is coming from this place of wanting to not improve in a way, but just gain clarity, then I think that in itself is very powerful as well. And yes, I do also have grounding
Right.
practices. Not so much things to shield myself, but because that is so strong for me when your intention is always sort of for the highest good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, what do we have next? This is a big one, Peter.
I
You
know.
must read reversals.
I can't go next. No, I love, right. I love the word you must. No, you
You
must
must.
not. But you can. You can. And for those who are unfamiliar with a reversal is a way of reading a card that actually shows up in an upside down position when you're working with the tarot. And I always think, it's up to the person who's working with the deck to choose whether or not that they want to use reversals. It is probably the most common question that I get from either mentoring students or class students, because when I teach the tarot, at least in initial stages with beginners, in a beginner's setting, I never, ever touch reversals. And that's not to say that I never use them in my own personal or my own professional practice. I have in the past, and then I don't now. So I also think, allow yourself to go through phases of, trying different things. Does this fit inside how I work with the tarot? Do I want to try and work with reversals right now? And if the answer is yes, then go ahead and give it a try. And if the answer is no, rest assured that with 78 cards that kind of cover the gamut of meanings, that you've got enough to work with if you don't work with cards flipped upside down. I don't know. I don't have much to say on it because I'll go back to my you do you statement. Bonnie, what do you think about, you must
You must read
read
reversals.
reversals?
Yes, I agree with you, Peter. Uh, there's two camps, I think, on this. People that are
Yeah.
like, no, you don't have to. And the other people that are like, no, you really have to.
Mhm.
And again, I believe it's a personal decision. When you're first learning the tarot, there are 78 cards. And if you tell people now, oh, you have to read you have to know 100 and what is it, 156?
Right? Yeah.
You add them together, then people are like, I'm never going to learn
Right.
156 meanings of
78's
cards.
daunting enough.
78 is. So I think if someone is starting out and the idea of having to memorize or understand the reverse meaning is a little bit too much, then I think starting off with just reading them upright is okay. And that's how I read the cards as well. I don't read reversals in their traditional way. If a card does end up popping up upside down, for me, I look that as like this card is really important. Like it showed up different than all the other cards. So what is it about this card and this reading that makes it so important? So that could be a way that you look at reversals. Of course, if reversals really speak to you and that's part of your practice because you believe that adds an extra layer to the cards, that's okay too. But I don't really think that it's you have to or you don't have to. It's really up to the practitioner and how they look at the cards and even the spread. Sometimes spreads have difficult, like generally when I do a reading, there's usually a challenge card for me that I include in that reading because I want to see, is there something that's challenging me, something that's blocked? So in a sense, that could almost be like, okay, this card may be a positive card that's showing up, but why is this challenging me right now? So I think it also depends on how you use the cards and what spreads are. So whatever you're most comfortable with works. And
Yeah.
I don't think you should be, people should tell you one way or the other. You still, 78 messages are still a
Still
lot.
a lot to work with, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
and I'm getting a sense we've got, the idea of of people telling you how to work with the tarot seems to be a sense that kind of makes its way through all of these myths as well. So
And I think it's another added reason why people might shy away from that
yeah.
too, right? Like, oh, there's all these rules or it could do all this stuff, right? So this is really about us having this conversation to say it can be whatever you want it to
Yeah.
be, right? Like it does, you don't have to follow all of those rules or things that you think
Right.
are out there.
Yeah. But
So,
yeah, but I mean, there are, cards do have general meanings and there are things
oh,
to learn. Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. But you're right. Some of the strong myths or beliefs or things that people put out there, you can kind of take or leave. So have you got
Exactly.
another one for us to explore?
I do. What do you think about this one? You can't read tarot for yourself.
Well, if I can't read tarot for myself, then I suspect that 90% of the work that I do in tarot needs to go by the wayside. Probably like an awful lot of people, I started working with the tarot for myself and by myself. I would have started learning the tarot when I would have never heard of anything like a tarot class or a workshop or, the tarot and tea, that we often attend. So I would have been with my nose in a book and in a deck, and I would have been working on my own, and I would have been trying out spreads, and I would have been pulling cards of the day, and I would have been writing down, what came from that. So and I still do. Most days I will draw a card or two cards. I do most of my tarot work on my own. I do ritual based or time of the year based work that includes the tarot, and that is all solo work. So again, in the same way, if you're waiting for somebody to gift you a deck, you're missing out on a rich experience. If you're following the idea that you can't read tarot for yourself, then I think you're missing out on an experience. But I'd probably then redefine the word reading to
Mm.
working with the tarot. So,
Right.
because it's a visual medium, and I guess as we're looking at the cards themselves, if we're calling that reading, then I think, working with the tarot, reading the tarot is something that you can do on your own for sure. And I would think many people there would agree. I think most people that I know who work with the tarot would do a significant amount of work that's independent of anybody else. So I don't know. What about you?
Yep. I
Ditto,
agree with you,
ditto,
Peter.
ditto. All
There's
right.
probably not going to be anything here that we don't agree on.
Hmm.
Uh, much like
No, you're
you,
probably right.
the tarot, my own tarot practice is a huge part of my life. It's something I start my day with. And I think this myth comes up because people could think, well, you're biased because you're only going to see what you want to see in the cards, right? So if something comes up for you, you're like, oh, of course that means that my knight in shining armor is just waiting for me because that's your desire. But I think if you're really honest with yourself and you
Mhm.
check in, and when these cards come up for you, what is it invoking for you, right? Again, it's this idea of expanding your
Yeah.
intuition as you start to use the cards. And I think if you're honest with, okay, this card is coming up for me, what does it really mean?
Mhm.
And you can sort of see, like, am I just hoping that that's what it means? Or can I see something else, something deeper in this card? Or
Mhm.
you could just be having a challenging situation and ask, like, what is it that I'm not seeing? So it is such a tool. Like, I really think where tarot is going is this idea of self-discovery and
Yeah.
exploration, and people using the tarot for their own benefit and
Mhm.
their own personal
Yeah.
practices. And it's not to say that you shouldn't get readings from anybody else because that's why we do this. We
Yeah.
we love to help people, but I think the idea is when these cards come up for you, what are you getting from that?
Yeah.
And even though you may be biased, I think whatever's popping up into your head is important and not to be
Mhm.
ignored. And if it is something that you do want and you are seeing validation for that, then you could be like, "Oh, wow, this is really coming true for me," or "I'm going down this path that I really want to go down." So, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you can work with the tarot by yourself. I,
Yeah.
I think, that's
Yeah.
really why we're here,
I would agree. I would agree.
encouraging people to use it as a tool.
Yep. All right.
Okay. The death card means physical death. So, uh, for me personally, I think this was one of those cards that freaked me out about the tarot. And again, if you're using tarot in this predictive nature and the death card shows up, a lot of people are like, I don't want to see that card because it's predicting something that I don't want to see. But again, if you're using, and the death card really doesn't mean death, it means an ending or a transformation
Right.
of some sort. So if we take that idea that it's predicting that something or someone is going to die, of course, nobody's going to want to use these cards because who wants to see that in a reading? So it's just an archetype. It's just a symbol of something that needs to end so something can be born, right? It's this idea of letting go of something
Mhm.
that's not helping you to move forward. So it really is a metaphor. It's an archetype. It's a symbol for something. It's not predicting um, an actual death. And I think that's probably one of the cards in the tarot that's the scariest for people to see, and I think it's the most misunderstood card. So it certainly was for myself, and I know, some other people, when I tell them I do tarot, they're like, I don't want a reading, I don't want to see what's going to come up. So
Yeah.
again, it's this misconception that I don't want to see something bad that's going to come up. But I think this idea of endings and letting go of something, if you can really look at your life again and check in and be like, what am I holding on
Mhm.
to that maybe is ready to be let go so something else can grow or something else can be born? So that's my take on the death card.
Yeah.
What do you think, Peter?
This is probably where, and I agree with you, but this is when we said, we're probably going to agree on all of them. This might be where we agree less.
You
And
disagree?
so for me, the myth, I would agree 100%. I don't think anything predicts physical death. Um, I'm not even sure that, there are things in medicine that can predict physical death like that we're just setting ourselves up for some pretty challenging energy if we're thinking that a piece of cardboard can predict death. But to me, and this is where I think sometimes, and maybe it's, because when I think of the astrological correspondence, the death card, and it's Scorpio, and I have tons of Scorpio in my birth chart. So maybe it's the whole Scorpio piece where I'm like, all right,
You're very connected to that
right.
card.
I am, because I think the idea of transformation, or, the idea that, endings have to happen so that something can be built. For me, the death card, it's not about that transformation. It's literally about the ending. I've started to refer to the death card, as the archetype of the great emptier. And
Mm.
I came across this term in a book that I had read not that long ago, in that we take the vessel and we empty it of all things, which in the end is what death is. And in the same way that Tower card gets a bad rap, and that, something has to be knocked down, the language we use, well, it's got to be knocked down to be rebuilt. Well, it does, but the Tower card doesn't represent rebuilding at all. In the same way, I think the Death card doesn't necessarily represent that transformation. I think that alchemical transformation actually comes more with the next card in the major arcana, with Temperance. I use the analogy of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The life of the caterpillar actually has to end before the butterfly can emerge. It's not like they both exist at the same time. One ends and the other begins. And I think the death card represents that ending. So, but the ending can be anything. It can be a project, it can be a relationship, it can
A
be
belief
a belief
system.
system. Exactly. Right. So when we talk about, emptying or ending through the death card, that's an important, as you mentioned, that's an important archetype. That's a strong, universal sense that everyone experiences, that certainly, doesn't come close to necessarily representing the idea of physical death. We have all kinds of things that end, all kinds of things that die, that are not people, that are not true deaths. They're, like you said, their beliefs and their ideas and their thought
Patterns.
processes and their routines and patterns and jobs and experiences and connections and relationships. They all end, and the death card represents that. So that's kind of where I come from with that one. So, but I love the myth, because it gets it. You're, like you said, the death card, especially in the Rider Waite Smith, that's a scary looking card. In the Tarot de Marseille, it was so scary they didn't bother naming it. They just put, the Grim
The
Reaper up
unnamed
there, like,
arcana.
exact right. It's because it's so strong. It's so strong. It evokes such a reaction. People didn't need it named. They knew exactly what it was. So,
Yeah.
it's
And I think too, in the beginning of this tarot journey for me, I tried to find decks that didn't have scary looking death cards because I was still like, I knew what it meant for me, but
yeah,
sometimes if that were to come up in a reading for somebody, and I always tell them ahead of time, I'm like, if you've never had a tarot reading before, there are some cards,
yeah.
and then I sort of explain that to them. I'm like, they don't predict that this is actually
Mhm.
going to happen.
Right.
It's a symbol for something, and they're fine with that. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think
I agree.
that yeah, that card is a super powerful message for, pros and cons of the tarot.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, where else are we as far as myths goes? We got a lot to look at.
Yeah, well, you're gonna love this, Peter.
Mhm.
This one's right up your alley. So, the myths around the origins of the
Oh, yeah,
tarot.
yeah. Yeah. So,
So,
I
like,
mean,
are they from ancient
right.
Egypt? There's myths of the Romani people, the secret teachings of Moses. Like, what do you?
Yeah,
This is your wheelhouse.
and and it's funny, right? Because there are tons, even, that it's some lost learnings from Atlantis, pagan societies. There's all kinds of myths around the tarot. And I actually love Rachel Pollack's take on this, and she does a wonderful job in a book that was, I think it's a walk through the Forest of Souls now. It was the Forest of Souls before, where she kind of addresses the idea that the mythos that makes up the origin of the tarot from a historical perspective, they're false. So we have a general idea now. We didn't always, but we have a general idea now that the tarot most likely originated in and around the 1450s in Milan or in northern Italy, in the duchies of Milan, through um, people commissioning decks almost as a, financial flex. It's like, hey, I have enough money that I can actually hire an artist to do this stuff that really doesn't mean anything. It's a game that we'll play, as we, talk in the high life of court life in Italy. But, you know, but when we talk about it being, you know, um, when it has an Egyptian origin, or, it is the Book of Thoth, or it is the secrets of, of any kind of people, it kind of lends to the mystery. We can know where it came from historically, but we can also hold space for any kind of mythological origin story of the tarot. And I think that's what might make it different from many other, call them systems of divination, is that it has that historical origin, but it really has a whole string of mythological origins as well. So I don't know. I kind of like that one because I think the myths of the origin of the tarot kind of lend itself to what the tarot is in general. And we know where it came from. We're pretty certain now through historical record, where it came from originally. Although we're not 100% certain, because again, we're talking about times where where we don't have an awful lot of information, where we're kind of we're bound to whatever is left over. We're talking about a paper medium, so it's not like all it takes is a deck to fall in the bathtub and it's gone. Like it we only know what we have present, but we're pretty sure we can trace its history. But isn't it kind of neat though to go, oh yeah, but you know what? I'm really holding all the knowledge of a lost, of the lost people of Atlantis in my hand, or the lost tribes of the Druids. Like you're like, oh wow, that's kind of cool actually. So I don't know.
It is. And I think again, it's up to sort of the person of where do they think the origins of tarot came from? Like if one story speaks to you in a way that you really resonate with, then that's okay for you because we don't know really. There are some historical data in terms of what you were
Mhm.
saying about where they started in Italy, and I believe that as well. And I think over time it's really evolved, and
Right.
that's what happened as well. So if there are bits that came from Atlantis or like ancient Egypt, or how people brought it through Europe and it ended up to be where it is today, I don't think any of that's wrong, and I don't think
Right.
any of that's right. Like you could look at, well, of course some of it is right, but I think it's all your
Mhm.
perspective and how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So there's so many different historical takes
Mhm.
on where it came from, and I think the most important part is how you use it today, how you resonate with the system, and it's kind of fun that it's mysterious and we
Mhm.
don't really know.
And then it really doesn't matter. Right?
Yeah,
In some ways, it doesn't matter. We have, we've got a deck in front of us, or we have the tarot in front of us, and it might have come from a whole bunch of different places. All right, fair enough.
yeah, who knows, right?
Next,
But
like really.
yeah, exactly.
All right, where are we as far as myths go?
We're good. We're done
How's the
with the
myth list?
myths.
Done with the
Yeah.
myths.
So basically, like tarot in reality,
Yeah.
what would it's like we've sort of talked about a lot of sort of the negative aspects that people think about
Yeah.
tarot. So what are some of the positive ones that people can walk away with today?
Yeah. So I mean, look, I always think that the tarot is such. I think if the myths of the tarot, or beliefs of what it might be, are holding you back from exploring the tarot, then I think you're missing a a rich opportunity for a valuable tool. Now, that can be used for a variety of different things. That can be used for self-discovery, that can be used as a support for journaling or self-reflection, that can be used as a tool for meditation through, visualization, that can be used as a tool for play. I mean, the tarot is a deck of cards. So any game that you could play with the deck of cards can be adapted to be played with a tarot deck of cards. So, I think, as far as like the tarot in reality, I think its use is so broad
Mhm.
that, I would really want to make sure that people who are interested in exploring the tarot further are not being held back because of something that they read or that someone said about the tarot that's acting like a barrier. That would be, I guess, where I would come from, just because it is it is such a rich tool to use in a variety of different ways. I don't know. What do you think on that, as far as the uses go in real everyday stuff?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. If you're called to the tarot, if you're curious about it, don't let some of these myths sort of sway you in any way. As I've mentioned before, I do believe that the system calls you when you're ready to start using it. And then just have an open mind of the cards. If the cards do seem a little scary in one way, well, look into that. Why does that feel scary to you?
Yeah.
And and again, when we first started the discussion about fortune telling, if you want to use the tarot for your own predictive natures,
Mhm.
or even for doing that for other people, there's nothing wrong with that as well. Again, it's the system that you can use in whatever way resonates with you, and it's so versatile, right? The more and more that we get into this, the more and more ways we can see that people are using the tarot for their own practices. And I think it's an amazing tool to help you awaken and expand and grow.
I agree. I agree. So, speaking of amazing tool, I think we're coming to the point where we actually use this tarot tool as, again, either whether it's, we kind of do our one card draw, use it as a tool for learning, as we both kind of talk a little bit about what the card that we draw means. Um, yeah, so I've got my trusty Rider-Waite-Smith here. I'm gonna start us off. That's all right. I'm gonna give it a shuffle,
Yes.
and we'll
Yes.
see. We'll see what card we pull. I was thinking we can hear that shuffle going away. Stubby fingers. All right.
I'm a terrible shuffler.
Look at this. We didn't pull this the last time, did we?
Yes.
Did we really?
Yes. You pulled the
Did I
Empress.
pull the Empress the last time?
Yes, you did.
Oh, what is this trying to say? So I'm gonna leave it there. So I'm gonna say, if you're looking to see what the Empress says, go and look at the previous podcast episode. But I'm gonna keep that in mind, because I always think, when a card comes up more than once, and this given opportunity, and so I just want to point out, it's not like the deck is sitting around. It's a deck that I use a lot. So to me, I always think, you think of the mechanics of a card. It's like, oh well, if I only shuffled it a little bit, then the likelihood of a card coming back to the top between recording podcasts, I would have used this deck quite a bit. So the Empress coming up again, is saying something. And to me, the Empress is a card of springtime. So I know, today here, we're recording this right in the heart of spring, where both Bonnie and I live. So I think that this might be a card sort of saying to me, hey, that Empress period, that period of abundance, is sort of upon you. But I'm going to draw a second card. King of Cups. So, and I won't talk a lot about this card, other than stating, the one practice I like to encourage people when you're exploring the idea of a court card is think of, either people, either roles that you play, or fictional people or fictional characters. And I think movie characters or TV characters are often kind of fun to look
Uh,
at.
I know
So
where you're
you
going
know where
with
I'm going with
this.
this, right? Because the King of Cups for me is Ted Lasso. Right. So if anybody is unfamiliar, then I apologize. I'll kind of explain. Ted Lasso is a football, so British football,
Fictional
yeah,
character.
fictional character on an Apple Plus show, Apple TV Plus show by the same name, Ted Lasso. So the title character, who is an American football coach who is called over to the UK to coach a fictional Premier League football club. So soccer in the UK. He knows nothing about the game, but his leadership skills, and he has a significant amount of leadership skill is all heart based.
Mhm.
Everything that he does is to try and enhance the feelings of the people who work with him, who work for him. And I always think, when we think about that concept of cups based leadership, which is what the King of Cups is, it's that idea of leading through the realm of emotion, of vulnerability, of heart, of feeling. Ted Lasso really plays that card well. So I knew we've talked about this before. So, you knew where I was going. So that's what I would think about the King of Cups. Anything that you have to offer about this particular card, about the King of Cups?
I love the king. Well, I love all the tarot cards. So you're gonna pull a card and I'll be like, oh, I love that card. I do love the King of Cups energy. Exactly. When you told me previously that you thought the King of Cups represented Ted Lasso, I completely agreed with you. So when I think of the King of Cups, I think about that person that you can turn to to lend a helping hand in, because the cups are the suit of emotions, right? Could lend a helping hand in terms of helping you emotionally, but even whatever it is that you need help with, that King of Cups, he's like that friendly neighbor that you can go to and be like, hey, can I get your help with this thing? So it's a really loving and supportive and compassionate energy from that card. And I also believe that in another deck that I have, it's like the King of Cups is standing in the sea and it's wild, like the sea is crazy and there's a ship that's coming in. Is he's sort of creating this path, this safe space for the ship to come in. So he's like that person who will hold you in your time of need and really create that
Yeah.
space to allow you to pass through safely with ease and grace. So I really love the energy of that card.
Yeah. What a great way to describe that card too. So yeah, no, thank you
Oh,
for
thank
offering
you.
that. Yeah. No, it's good. I'm
That's
going to
why
keep
I
that
love
in
so
mind.
many different decks,
Yeah.
right? Because you see the perspective in a different way. And
Yeah.
although the messaging is very similar, it helps you to sort of look at it from a different lens.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
okay, so I'm going to use the light seers. I'm shuffling my deck. Let's see what pops out. Ah, okay, another court card. So I've pulled the Page of Swords.
Oh, okay.
So in this card, there's sort of a younger person, someone in their youth, maybe like early teenager, walking across this tightrope with a book in her hand, and there's some light bulbs and a bird flying overhead. So she really looks engaged in what it is that she's doing. So when I see the Page of Swords, I like to tie it almost to the ace, right? Like you think of something like a new
Mhm,
beginning, a new
mhm,
opportunity. And in this card, she really looks like a student or something that she's wanting to learn. So with the Page of Swords, it's like, what is it that you're curious about? And maybe it's that hint to follow something or start learning something new. Um, Following an idea, right? It's like this light bulb moment, like something that comes into your head. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it like that. Do I need to take a course? Do I want to buy a book? Do I want to look into that a little bit more? So, sort of seeing where that curiosity takes you, and also that you're at the beginning of something. So, again, if this is a new idea to you, or if you're curious about tarot, maybe this message is for you to maybe go buy a deck or go buy a book, right? And
yeah.
then be like, oh, I want to see where this is going to take me. It's sort of the beginning of that journey and always having that youthful, playful energy to go with that. I think the pages really represent fun and seeing things from a starting point and not sort of being afraid that we don't know. I don't know. What else can you add to the Page of Swords?
Not much. I love the connection you made between the page and the ace, because I always think that, the ace is that seed, that beginning kind of energy of the suit. And I think the page always personifies that. So I always think of the page as the personification of the ace. The ace isn't, the ace is an idea. The page is that idea in action.
Mhm.
And then I think of, well, in what suit is, because I'm with you. I think all pages are that innocent beginning journey. Learning something is a great, kind of a great description of any of the pages. And then it's like, well, in what area does that learning come from? And as you said, we were talking about the Page of Swords. So that idea, that going with an idea, that level of curiosity, when we're talking about that element of air that's associated with the swords, we're thinking about somebody who is moving forward with an idea. And the Light Seer's Tarot has that light bulb, those light bulbs kind of hanging almost like balloons in the air, which is like, well, what idea is popping into your head? What should you pursue? Where should you use that almost innocence of youth to go, oh, I always think about that. It's almost a baby like energy where, like babies explore their environment, it almost constantly. It's like, oh, what is this? 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 That Page of Swords has that same energy, that idea of learning something based on an idea. The other thing that I might add would be, because it lives in the world of swords, it might be kind of words and idea based. So, it could be, as you talk about, might be starting a course. It might be a course that involves, either writing or reading or the manipulation of
Mhm.
words. So if it is an invitation to learn the tarot, then it could be, as you said, maybe go and grab a book, maybe listen to something that is, kind of words or idea based, like a podcast, for example, or a course. So, it's great. Yeah. The it's funny that we got chord cards today too, right? The idea of chord cards. And then, I'd invite you, based on what we described, is there fictional character, or somebody that, you think about who might be that Page of Swords? And I know for me, I would think of Hermione Granger in the
Mm.
right in the Harry Potter series, has that concept of, you know, that initial learning of ideas, every spell you could imagine she knew. So, that I always have fun with that when I think, oh, 16 chord cards. I wonder where they're going to link. So that would be one I would link. And, I'd invite you to do the same. Pop that in the comments, on whatever platform you're looking at. Do you want to take the opportunity to let people know where they can find you and if you've got anything going on?
Sure, yes. So you can find me at breathewithbonnie.com, breathe with an E. We'll include that in the show notes as well. My contact information is on my website. Any new things that I'm working on, I will generally post there as well. You can also find me on Instagram at Breathe with Bonnie. And yeah, well, I'll post that in the show notes. How about you, Peter? Where can people find you?
Well, you can always find me at peterwhitetarot.com, or you can find me on Instagram or Facebook with the same kind of handle, Peter White Tarot. Lots of things going on. What I'll highlight, just based on some of our conversation, is I have a series of courses. At the first one, so the course itself, the series is called Learn the Tarot, or Learning the Tarot. And the very first course is called The Beginner's Journey. And it's a course that's designed, it's now self-directed. The live kind of cohort is done, but always monitored. I monitor the chats, lots of information, 5 rich lessons that take somebody who might be familiar with the tarot but has never gone deep into each section of the tarot. So a lesson, for example, on the minor arcana, a lesson on the major arcana, a lesson on what kind of things can we do with the tarot, a little touch on its history. So sort of almost a broad overview of the tarot. And I'll include the link for that course as well below. Like I said, self-guided, but with all kinds of support for anybody who might be looking to start that learning journey. I'm offering that course as well. So
Wonderful.
that's it from me. And I guess that's it from both of us. So, I will thank you so much for joining us today around the tarot table. If you like what you hear, we would invite you then to either like or subscribe, depending on where you're listening, and share. Please go to the share medium, share the link of our podcast, with friends and with other people who you think might enjoy this. And having said that, I want to thank you all for joining us on our journey today, for sitting around the tarot table, and I will say so long.
See you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye.